Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jet Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Hey everybody, I would like to welcome you to another episode of Pop Culture Gems. This is a series where we talk to amazing creators, artists, cosplayers, voice actors, and so much more. If you like the interviews we do with these terrific guests, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, the CFG channel. We also release Pop Culture Gems on all podcast services, or go to our main website, confreaksandgeeks.com, to not miss an episode. Today, I am with two individuals who made my Saturday morning cartoon watching incredible. This showrunner writing duo has created and written in several projects like Street Fighter, the animated series, Mummies Alive, RoboCop, and so much more. But today, I want to talk about one of the most popular series that they were involved in, XMEN, the animated series. I would like to talk to Eric and Julia Lewald to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Oh yes, it's great. The pleasure is all mine. I just, if I have a chance to talk about X-Men with someone, especially someone that was truly involved in my childhood, I will definitely do that. I will definitely choose that any day of the week. But let's get this started here. In the early 90s, Marvel was not the powerhouse as it is today. And at the time, they did not have an animated series for any of their heroes. The last Marvel animated series on television was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which was 10 years prior, which is like in the early 80s. What had to be done to get X-Men, the animated series, to happen?
A lot.
Yeah, but mostly it comes down to the efforts of one person. Because back during all that 10 years, there were people that believed X-Men could be a good show. Margaret Leish was working at Marvel Productions with Stan Lee and a number of the artists that ended up working on our show. But they just could not sell a Marvel property to Hollywood. Hollywood just didn't think, oh, that's just for, a couple of guys in their basements, reading comic books. It's just, that's not our people. It's not our audience. We need 10 times that many folks.
And I want to jump in here. Way back then, you had 3 networks for Saturday morning TV if you were a kid, and you had some syndicated. You had ABC, NBC, CBS. That's where you watched your Saturday morning shows.
Right. And none of them got Marvel.
No.
And so Margaret was just frustrated. She had a hand in a dozen wonderful shows. She was at Hanna-Barbera when they did Smurfs. She was at when she was at Marvel, they had Muppet Babies and Transformers. I mean,
on the production side.
So she was on the production side of some of the best shows that happened during the 80s, but she just could not get anybody to even take her phone calls about doing an X-Men show. So what happens? The Fox network starts out as a little bitty network to compete with the big 3, and it's maybe getting 5% of the audience. The other 3 are getting 95%.
They start consolidating different syndicated channels around the country, trying to create a national coverage.
But so they hire her. They said, "Look, we need somebody to make a Saturday morning group for us." I said, "Aha! Now I get my chance." So it's going to take me a year or 2 to get the show's up and running, but I'm going to get X-Men. I'm going to get Spider-Man. I'm going to get Batman. I'm going to, Silver Surfer. These are things I believe, that she believed in. So that's how the offer came, because she was there and she put her job on the line. I mean, she showed the comic books to her bosses at Fox, and the bosses say, "This looks awful intense. I don't see our children that were selling cornflakes to buying these books or watching this show." And she said, "No, you got to believe me." And they said, "Well, if it flops, you're gone." And she said, okay, done deal. Let me get started." So she hired the creatives that she'd worked with before. Her right-hand man, Sidney Iwander, who was hands-on on all those shows all at once. This poor man giving notes to all of us. Those two believed in the core of what the X-Men was. And she hired people. She hired me because I'd done a year of Beetlejuice for her at Fox. And so she and Sidney thought I kind of had maybe the right tone or the right kind of heroic storytelling for the series. I didn't know the X-Men. Well, I got the call the night before we got started with all the big shots there in the room to get started on the show. And I said, "Oh, X-Men, that's a Marvel book, right?" So I had to learn it real fast. Like,
did you have to do the initial pitch for it, or
thank goodness I didn't. There were a couple of our senior artists, Larry Houston and Will Minia, were there, and they were talking about what it needed to be, and they had memorized the X-Men. They'd read them since 1963, so there was no problem on the artist side.
And Margaret Lush, again, as president of Fox Kids, was going to make the show happen.
And it was her baby, it was her pitch, and she had worked with and befriended Stan Lee, so she kind of had him on her side. But so they sold it, and I just had to be quiet until I got up to speed and got the scripts going.
He had to be quiet during that meeting, because then you were charged with, we need a Bible and a pilot in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And there was no office space. There was nothing going on. You had to come home to our place and work on our dining room table.
No internet, nothing to Google. I had to go to friends and borrow old comic books and Marvel reference books to see who was who and who meant what to who, and so all of that.
So wait,
very, very fast.
So you're telling me, like, in between, like a 2-week period to kind of was it the pilot, or was it actually the first episode?
It was deciding what the whole world was, who we're going to use, what the first 13 stories were, not to write them all, but the one paragraph version of the first 13 stories, and get that checked off on, because we're starting late. It happens a lot out here. You say, okay, we're ready to go, but we're already 2 months behind.
Oh my God! So you're telling me the main infrastructure of X-Men, the first season, was a 2-week marathon? My head writer and buddy from college, Mark Edens, who he wrote on about 30 of them. He only took credits for 18 or 19. So
best writer.
We're sitting at our dining room table, chugging back iced tea and
Diet Coke,
and calling up again people like Larry Houston who knew the characters better. And we had a very nice man at Marvel named Bob Harris, who's in charge of all the X-Men books. And I would fax him. Remember, it's before email. I would fax him with questions. Would Wolverine do this? Would Storm do this? What side of Rogue can I ask this question about? And so yeah, we got that all going, and it was the good part about working so fast was there was no time to second guess it. And the folks at Marvel, they were small staffed. You're right. They were they're 3,000 miles away
in New York.
And they were all working 60, 70-hour weeks just to get the comic books out. They didn't have a lot of time to worry about what we were doing with their show.
There was no internet. There was no Google. There were telephones, and they shut down at 5 o'clock on a Friday, which was 2 o'clock our time.
Yeah, like 3 hours ahead of you.
It was over.
So for good or bad, it was kind of left in our laps. And nowadays it's crazy to think about it, because Marvel is this multi-billion-dollar company, and I'm sure they don't write a comma or dot a period without 7 different people making sure that it fits in the MCU. None of that. This is us cobbling it together in our dining room.
But I just want to show this, and I don't know if you this is shameless plug department, but Eric and I have a book out called X-Men: The Art and Making of the Animated Series. that Marvel Disney asked us to do. Yay! But just to show you how primitive, this is a page of the stuff that Larry Houston faxed over to Eric. This is the level we're talking about.
That is faxing. Oh, black and white.
And notice Larry scratched through Xavier and said, "Oh no, he's in a wheelchair now." This is the level of guidance and information Eric had back then. Oh, okay, all right.
But
Go.
But the good part was we had enough people on staff that absolutely loved and understood what the X-Men were all about, so that we couldn't go too far wrong without them pointing it out to us. And we, on the other hand, on the writing staff, most of us are just focusing on how do we make the best 22-minute television show out of these characters. We were worried about adapting certain episodes, with one exception, the Days of Future Past, which she and Bob Skier were on. But for the first 26 episodes, it was basically what's the coolest rogue story we could tell? What's the most intense beast story we could tell? And then we just start picking bits and pieces from these reference books or from fans' memories, or just made stuff up out of whole cloth. And what that did was, since we spent a lot of time taking stuff where we could find it, the fans were satisfied. But the people who didn't know the books, which we were warned was going to be 80 or 85% of our audience, who would have no idea what X-Men were, they could enjoy the story just as a heroic story as they were gradually getting to know who and what the X-Men were all about. So there was this nice it was dumb luck on our part. We've been involved in dozens of shows, over the years.
We met at Disney TV Animation.
And
as writers side by side.
There are 100 things that can go wrong with a show, and just this one was magic. It was the right people, the right artists, the right executives, the right year, the right
network.
It sounds like the perfect storm. I mean, because like you were saying, like you said, that the people that were backing you, especially the main person that was backing you, was the president of the studio itself, and that's pretty unheard of nowadays for this kind of thing.
And I want to jump in and say she had been at Marvel and had been banging the drum for an X-Men animated series for quite a few years. And she managed to scrap together enough money to produce what she'd hoped would be a pilot for an X-Men series. And she was working with Will Mineo and Larry Houston on this.
Called Pride of the X-Men. It was a one-off.
But there were so many folks above her at that point. No, put this in. No, change that. No, do this. We can tell you why Wolverine's Australian in that one if you want to know.
Yes, actually, that's what I was going to go into, because that was my second question. Because I was like initially the pilot of the anime series was Pride of the X-Men, and it was aligned. It was aligned more with the playable characters in the X-Men arcade game that came out back in like '92, the Gigantor 6-player one. Some characters like Dazzler and Nightcrawler were replaced when the first season came out. It was replaced with like Rogue, Gambit, and stuff like that. But I kind of wanted to know, like, why did y'all like change up the team so much from the pilot?
Well, okay, the pilot, just so you know,
they were separate companies, and the pilot came out in, I think,
86 or 87.
So that's like 6 years. Spread in, and the people that Margaret and Sydney and Will Mineo and a lot of the
Larry
artists,
Houston.
all sorts of people worked on that, and they all thought of it as something that didn't work. So when it came time to do the new show, which we thought of as separate, I'd never seen it. I obviously watched it as soon as I got the job, but I'd never seen it, so I didn't have anything to do with the original one. But they looked back on it and said, you know what? They made Wolverine Australian because Crocodile Dundee was popular that year. So there were a lot of
the guys above Margaret
a lot of business marketing decisions made like that just were terrible. And then they would threw in like 30 different characters in 22 minutes, and it wasn't time to get to know any of them.
But in a craven effort to sell toy products.
Yeah, it's like, we got to put them all there because we're going to have action figures for all of them. So the problem with Pride of the X-Men was it wasn't thought through as a real pilot for a real series. It was more a promotional tool. And that's why people didn't gravitate to it.
The right people were there, but they weren't in charge. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until 4 years later at Fox Kids that fortunately those folks had gone through the Pride of the X-Men experience. And there were many times at the beginning of X-Men, the animated series, where each one of them at one point said, no, this is how I'm going to do it, or I'm going to walk. You can let me go. No, no.
Because all during that first year, it takes about 9 months from the time you decide, oh, we're going to do Night of the Sentinels, till you get it written and storyboarded and animated and recorded and cut together and the music.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's
9 months?
Yes.
Yeah, because if you remember, every cell was hand painted.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
you
It'd be sent overseas.
maybe 800,000 or 900,000 hand painted cells for one episode.
No computer.
Yeah, and so that's how long it took. And during that time, when we're waiting to see what the show's, because it takes 6 months before we can really even see and listen to an episode. During that time, there are people that maybe wanted to throw the 2 cents worth in and change it around, make it a lot younger, make it sillier, make it whatever it is, change the tone and focus and the stories in it. And some of those people had a certain voice or had a certain leverage, and to the person, those of us on the writing side, those of us on the art side, and our executives at Fox just said, no, look, we know what we're doing here. We're not changing this. And there was some serious pressure to make it a different show. And as Julia said, there would become times where at the end of the week, they'd say, look, if you keep pushing this in the wrong direction, we'll all just walk, because we don't want to end up with what happened on Pride of the X-Men. We weren't happy with the way the story went or where the characters went. And it was like that almost had to fail to get everybody to be able to say, not again. This time we're doing it our way. And if it falls, it falls, and we all walk away. But we're not changing it.
I mean, some of the decision making that y'all did in that in that series, it was like, I mean, for a kid series, it was pretty serious. It was pretty hardcore. And like I was going to say, one of my other questions was like the thing. I'm actually surprised, because when you said that the structure of the first season was in 2 weeks, it just felt like you made the continuity make it look like it made sense. Like it made sense from episode 1 to episode 13 of the first season. And like, it looks like it would have been like, it was like something that you did for months or something like that, or, for that kind of coolness.
Well, and Margaret Lesh had been, I want to do the X-Men, and her higher up saying, we will give you 1 season. And if this, just assume it's 1 season, because everyone had bet that it wasn't going to work. So when you were hired to do 13 episodes, boom, and that's it. Just do 13. So when you and Mark sat down, it was, what are the best 13 episodes, the strongest that we can tell to introduce X-Men to a world where 95% of the people didn't know who the X-Men were. And that was all you got.
Yeah. And if funny looking back at it, all of us creative folks were let go in, let's say, July.
Yeah.
When we done our work, and it was going to premiere in September, but there were production problems. It ended up being like twice as difficult a show to produce as people had imagined and people had budgeted.
Yeah.
So they had to dig up a little more money, and they had to work overtime and get the show right. But we were let go, and we started Exo Squad while we're waiting to see if anybody was going to watch our show. So it didn't properly premiere till January 8th of 93.
Mm-hmm.
And on that day it premiered, and it was already, it was number 1 to start off with. And that way, the nice thing about it was we didn't get any more of those calls about changing it.
Yeah.
As soon as it's a success, everybody always loved it from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And but since we'd been let go and we were working on another show, Mark and his brother Michael and I worked on Exo Squad for 3.5 months while we were waiting for X-Men to premiere. Some of us could come back. Mark and Michael missed about half a year of writing for X-Men because they finished up Exo Squad. They stayed. Will Mineo stayed over with Exo Squad. Yeah. Will was the head designer of that. But Larry came back, and I came back, and Julia came back, and so enough of us came back that the second season went great.
Well, Okay, on a personal note, the second season did go great, but as a writer, let me tell you what happened.
Give you a
Let
little
me tell
Hollywood
you.
story, a little Hollywood,
Oh my God.
little Hollywood hard truth.
So it took 4 different places to come up with the money to make X-Men. There was not a studio like, say, Warner Brothers for Batman or Paramount for Star Trek. So 4 different things were
Small companies.
small companies put together to make the money to make X-Men. And when second season came around, the person with the purse strings to cover the writers and other costs, Saban Entertainment, hi, I'm Saban. Hey, we've got a second season, yay. And on the writing side, we're like, it's a hit show.
It's #1 show. We're going to get a big bonus.
Woohoo! And instead, we were each informed, it's a hit show. I've got a line of writers out the door who want to write for it. You'll take the script for $500 less, or I get someone else.
What?
Huh?
So the writers got the script fees cut
By $500
for delivering this guy his first #1 show in his life, and it was a sad day. But
Eric, to his credit, as a gentleman and a scholar,
I covered it because they didn't cut my fees, but I covered it for the next 13. But that was
unbelievable.
That's a cold introduction to Hollywood.
Yeah.
That is an incredibly cold introduction to Hollywood. What the oh, congratulations. You done something that was like destined to fail, and you made something brand new, and it was a gigantic hit. But we feel like we could pay you less to hit that magic again. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What?
So there you
Wow.
go.
Oh my God. How involved was Stan Lee or Marvel themselves during the production of the series?
As I said, the gentleman Bob Harris, who was in charge of the books
In New York.
He and Joe Calamari, who's a great name, Joey the Squid.
Joey the Squid.
Who's
Oh,
been with
wow.
Marvel forever. He was an attorney. I would send them every single thing we came up with, every idea, every premise, every outline, every script, every revision of every script. So they could weigh in on it, and they could say, I'm just not sure that the second part of the story is working yet, or, has specific notes. So they had the opportunity. Bob was incredibly busy. So sometimes, his notes were lighter than others.
How many X books did they get out of that time?
Yeah, I think he had 3 or 4 X books to get out.
Yeah, each month.
But so they were helpful. But the nice thing that Margaret had set up at Fox was that it was Fox's show. So if it came to where there was an episode that we liked that Marvel didn't care for, we just say, we'll try to adjust it a little bit, but we really like the show, so we're keeping it. And shucks, we're sorry, they didn't have final say.
I'm sorry,
Marvel did not have final say.
Oh my God.
Which is totally hard to believe looking at right now. But so basically it was our show, and our bosses were Margaret and Sydney. Mm-hmm. And if they were good with something, we ran with it. And that didn't happen that often that Marvel didn't care for something. And I had to, and we didn't find some middle ground that made us both happy. Usually we could. And as far as Stan went, Stan, it's funny. Stan had been like the biggest name in the history forever, and rightfully so. But he'd been involved with writing the comics from like World War II to about the early 70s. And his name kept being on absolutely everything. I mean, obviously his name was on every movie, but he wasn't creatively involved in creating the movies. He was executive producer on every one of the big movies, but it wasn't like he was in on the writing team. He was on the Spider-Man show. He was heavily involved creatively on the Spider-Man show, but on our show, he was one of the folks. He had a much younger idea. The X-Men that he and Jack Kirby had come up with in 1963 were a bunch of American teenagers, like 5 guys and a girl, and the X-Men book had gone out of publication because it didn't quite work.
Go all the way, yeah.
In 1970. But when it came back in 75 as rebirthed, it was a very different group of people and it was an international, multiracial group of people.
Adulting.
And they've gotten older, they got more intense, they got more everything about it, it was like post Watergate, it was post Vietnam. It was just gotten much more serious than the early stuff in the 60s. And Stan didn't really know the later books. His memory was of when they all had blue suits and they were wisecracking our teenagers. And so when we would start getting some notes from him the first season, I just kept on trying to gently push back and say, you know, that's not really our show. If we try to do that, it's just going to turn it upside down. It's not going to work. And there was a big moment where we had Stan was getting frustrated that we weren't changing the show the way he wanted us to. And we just had to have a big moment with Margaret's boss, with the head of the actual, all of Fox Television, to say, we're all committed to the older, newer, tougher, more challenging version. And we love Stan and respect him, and we'll always read everything he suggests. But one of us has to run the show. And if it's going to be Eric, that's great. If it's going to be Stan, Eric says, fine, I'll give up the best job I ever had, but it's your money, Fox. You make a decision. I just say we had to have that meeting to clear that up. And once it was this big hit, you know, Stan went on to other stuff, went on to Spider-Man, and everybody was fine. But until the show came out, I think he sincerely believed that if we made it like the current, like Chris Claremont comics, like the 90s comics, that it would be terrible and it would be a failure and the kids wouldn't get it. So he just sincerely had a different vision for the show. And that was obviously that was tough for me. I didn't want to have a fight with Stan Lee. You know, who wants to do that?
That'll be a crazy story to tell in the future, though. I will say, it's like, I put my foot down to say no to Stan Lee's creation. So I mean, that'd be. But then again, though, too, I mean, the universe, like you said, is a night and day difference of what Stan Lee did right. If anything, it was probably more closer to Chris Claremont's the Chris Claremont storyline at the time that it was running in. And also, like, I believe the animated series also did an upgrade of the outfit, so that was like also Jim Lee's style of art too, on top of all of that. So it's
absolutely.
just like,
we had the pleasure of working with Stan Lee
many times after. So there's no hard feelings there. Stan understood,
but it was tense there for a while because no one knew if X-Men was going to work. No one.
Yeah, and a lot of people had a lot of money wrapped up in this, and we are. We're all in our early 30s, and we're just saying, look, trust us. You know, this is going to be fine. And
Margaret Lesh leading the way,
and Margaret backing us every time.
Yeah,
and thank goodness for her, because we've been involved in shows that we thought were going to be as good or close to as good as X-Men. And you make a couple wrong decisions, you know, a couple cooks throw a few things into the mix, and it doesn't work.
That's unbelievable, like how much freedom you had on the show.
We look back, we're so grateful, you know, that just basically nobody looking over our shoulder. We had to work so fast, and they needed it so fast. And everybody, that there's an advantage of that. We've worked, you know, the reverse of it is we were working at Disney TV Animation.
Loved it.
Loved wonderful people. We were there for 3 years on staff. That's where we met.
Mm-hmm.
So what y'all do? Did y'all do like Tailspin or like Chippendale and all that?
Where's my arm?
She wrote 14 Chippendale Rescue Rangers, more than any other.
Oh my god. That's like so old school Disney afternoon. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Tailspin, Oof Troop, Darkwing Duck, and Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
At Disney, they had lots of money, they had lots of time, they had a huge staff.
Most talented you'll ever find.
Some of the nicest people. But that let them, well, why don't we rethink that and do a 7th take on that story?
On the executive side.
Or maybe an 8th take on that story. Maybe versus X-Men, which is just we need that song written tonight. You know, we need that script out in the morning. Very, very different experiences.
And I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I know you got a lot of questions, but I just wanted, since we're kind of at this point in the story, one of those things that could have gone horribly wrong was the casting of the voice talent for the series, and that was taking place up in Toronto, Canada. Again, money considerations.
My goodness.
And if the show had been, if it had been just You got the voices came back. You'd sent up a bunch of sides for the auditioner people to audition and read these sides to determine who these voices would be for the cast for X-Men.
And they came back, and it sounded like X-Men Scooby-Doo.
Because Toronto has a very talented pool, but that's what they were used to.
Yeah, I mean, they're good people. They did the voices for Beetlejuice. I mean, they are good, top of the line professional voice actors. But we tried to explain to them how adult we wanted this to sound, and it just didn't register. They said, "Yeah, we understand. We'll make it. We'll turn the knob a little bit. Don't worry. Our people know how to do cartoons." So we got this really cartoony X-Men back. It was like, oh God, it's over. It's dead. It's finished forever. So Larry Houston and Sydney
and
the people from Marvel,
right?
Bob Harris and Joe Calamari went up and just sat for 2 weeks with folks in Toronto and recast the whole thing.
Re-auditioned dozens,
and even went up there saying, "Look, don't just ask your cartoon people. Ask some of your Shakespearean theater people,
big theater crew in Toronto.
Yeah, big theater world in Toronto. Get people with some gravitas to their voice. Get people some drama and add to their voice." And so that when they redid it, that's I think one reason the voices are so perfect and so wonderful. It's like they overcompensated. They said, "Oh, we don't want to disappoint these folks again. We're running out of time. Let's just get the most intense 8, 9, 10 people we can find," and they did.
Y'all did. Y'all did an insane job on that. If that's the case, because you're totally right. All the voices did fit the characters.
What was that with Bob Harris when he first heard Cal Dodd come in to read for Wolverine, and Sydney Iwander in the booth? Cal's, who is this character? What is he? And Sydney, I think, said he's feral. That's all Sydney said.
He's a wild man. He's feral, and so Cal growled.
Just started growling in the microphone, and Bob Harris's head snapped around, and
everybody's jumping up and down. Yeah, that's a guy.
That's Wolverine. That's our Wolverine.
Growl again. Oh, yeah.
Not the Australian guy from the 80s. That's funny. Like how far ahead? I mean, besides the 2-week marathon that you did in the first season, we already know that. But like, how far ahead were you planning while making the series? After on. Like,
the way it would work for us, it was kind of like the season by season, it was year by year.
Mm-hmm.
We got the
13 episodes.
Yeah, we'd get the order to do the first 13, and that took from mid-February to mid-July to finish
the writing,
thinking up the stories, assigning it to writers, stretching the premises, stretching it 10-page outlines, stretching it to 40-page scripts, getting Marvel would have notes, and Fox would have notes, and the artists, like Larry, would have notes, and so we'd make a couple revisions, and then boom, they get up and be recorded. But it took that however many months that is, 5 months, to go from we're doing the show to we're done with those 13 scripts are locked. They're off into production. They've been storyboarded. We're done. Mm-hmm. And so we had it planned out that far. And as I say, at that point, they laid us off because they didn't want to be paying our salaries while they waited till January for the show to premiere. Then as soon as the show premiered and it's a hit, they said, okay, well, we're going to hire everybody for a second season. Well, then again, you're back going fast because it's now mid-January and you're still having to try to hit for the fall. So the second season was a little easier, a little more time. Mm-hmm. And we knew our show and we knew successful. So there's a lot of energy in that. But then, so we were done with that. And again, if that had been it, 26 episodes, that would have been cool. We would have gone on to do another show. But at a certain point along in the writing of the second season, before we were laid off, before we had a pause or hiatus there, it was just doing so well. It was just making everybody so much money that they all got their heads together and said, we're going to commit to 3 more seasons. Boom, 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 39 more. Wow. And so at that point, it was, I think it's August that year, we all got up, but all of us out here in California got up and plane and went to
Eric and Mark Edens
and Sydney Iwander and Larry, and we went to
New York City,
New York to see Marvel, and we hung out for a couple of days and said, okay, we have 2 wonderful seasons here, and everybody's happy, and we've laid out this world. Now, Marvel, have all your people, tell us who haven't we used yet that you'd love for us to use? What stories haven't we done? And so at that meeting, they said, okay, the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix. So boom, that's done,
9
done.
right there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thrilled. My job is to figure out those 39 episodes, and I was just handed 9 on a platter. Okay, there's 9 of them. I don't have to worry
9 of the
about
crown
those.
jewels. On a platter.
And
Oh,
then,
no
but
kidding.
beyond that, they said, okay, we'd like to see, this Mojo or
Weird World.
Death Strike or Nightcrawler or we want to see more with Juggernaut or whatever. They had a list of suggestions, and some of them worked out and some of them didn't. But that was a kind of a recharging. Like, okay, we've done the 26, and now boom, and they give us more time. They were making enough money that we were doing a script a week, and now we had like 10 days, so we had like a week and a half per script. So we had more time to think it through and hire the people we wanted to hire. And
so it wasn't like it wasn't as much of a rush job usually the first season usually is the nightmare season because that's the one where it's like a make or break. But but I just find it very interesting. Like, X-Men, the anime series, lasted for 5 seasons, and even throughout that whole time, it just felt that you were telling a continuous story, even though there were different like plot lines. Like, they went to space, they went to Weird World, they did all these different kinds of things. They like the time when you go at the very beginning of the episode where you hear previously on X-Men, then it's like it just rewinds. It's like stuff from even all the way back from the first or second season, and it'll be like, oh, this makes sense. So this person's doing this because of what happened like years, like the first time and stuff. It's like all of it connected really well. So I was like, this is amazing that y'all were just able to do all of that,
I want to give a shout out to a woman named Sharon Janis, who was the editor for the series. And there was tremendous pushback. Will Mineo said comic books tell a story sequentially. The X-Men needs to have that kind of feel of telling stories sequentially.
And there's a lot of pushback because they don't want to do that in case episode 3 comes back bad.
Which is what happened.
Have to wait on episode 4.
But so the idea of telling sequentially, there were again pushback. Kids aren't going to remember. Well, Sharon Janis said, if I can craft a little recap for the start of some of the episodes, previously on, and I'll do that. That will save you anywhere from 20 to 45 seconds of animation that you don't have to pay for new, because I'm using clips from old shows. And the money.
So they went for that in a month. They went for that in a heartbeat.
She's saving us 20 to 45 seconds. Yeah. So it's that kind of scrambling.
So it was her doing, and she was really good at it.
Really
she had done it for
years.
Yeah,
she was incredible
in primetime stuff before, and she was a really tight editor. She and the producer Scott Thomas both had serious editing experience. And so if you look back, a lot of the shows, certainly the shows in the 70s and 80s were very slow, but even some of our contemporaries were kind of leisurely paced, and our guys, boom, 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 boom. Those guys had from all the way down, from the artists to the writers to the editors, we all wanted this thing to really rock. And so now looking back, it doesn't feel dated and slow. It feels like the right pace, because more modern stuff now moves faster.
One of the things, if you start from the beginning, as one should, as we're getting ready for the next stuff with X-Men coming out with Disney Plus in the fall, hopefully, fingers crossed. If you start at the beginning, the first season, sequential, big episodes, a big story arc. Second season, you got the Savage Land, but the Savage Land, you guys figured out, you and Mark, how to do it cleverly, where you had 2-minute Savage Land chunks on each of the episodes.
So that continued in order, and the stories in between that went with those, that minute and a half or whatever in the Savage Land, those were kind of interchangeable. If you look at them, they seem like it's progressing, but they actually, we were warned, okay, we don't know if we can do them in a row anymore. We said, well, can you just give us like that minute and a half? For the Savage Land.
So all the Savage Land stuff was written
and produced first.
first before the rest of the episode.
So it would be ready no matter what. It would be ready and ready to pull you along through that second season.
So you did like one episode of the Savage Land itself, and then but you just cut the episode into small bits, and then just prolonged it.
It was always planned
as small bits. But yeah, we had did Russ write on. I think my brother-in-law wrote on that. We sat down and said, okay, here's a 2-parter to open the season. There's going to be a 2-parter at the end, and we need nine little bits in between. And so we sat down and wrote the 9 little bit, wrote one script that had the 9 little bits in it, and it progressed from A to B to C to D to E to F. And that was fun. And it connected that second season for everybody.
Wow, that's cool. And I mean, some of the episodes were pretty hardcore, like I said, for kids itself, especially for a kids cartoon itself. So like, for example, in the first episode, the very series premiere of X-Men itself, it's like you killed off from the team like that we just gotten introduced to maybe 10 or 15 minutes prior to the episode, the shapeshifter morph. Like, yes. I was like, what is going on? Like, when I was a child, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Cause I didn't know X-Men either when I was a kid. And then I just saw the dude with the claws was good friends with this man that morphed into different things. And then you just decided to do that. I was just like, how much freedom did you have? Like, that was like cause you will never see something like, I don't think you'll ever see like, okay, it's time let's just kill off one of the main characters on the main team that you're pushing. Like, how much freedom did y'all have?
Here we are 30 years later talking about that very point. And I remember when you brought that up, the idea of you didn't want it to be like every week it's a reset. Everyone, the fights don't matter. You wanted consequence. You wanted the heroic struggle or heroic sacrifice. And you and Mark suggested we need to kill an X-Men in the opening sequences so people know the stakes are real, that bad things can happen and consequences matter. And I'm going, good luck with that, getting that passed. But another shout out to every network has a broadcast standards and practices person or your censor. Avery Coburn was the person at Fox Kids who was in charge of those decisions. And her word was law. If she didn't want it, it wasn't going to happen. But you had a real meaningful dialogue back and forth with her. She liked the books. She understood what you were doing. Yeah. And so she said,
trusted us. She said, look, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to see what you write in the script. This can't be gratuitous. It can't be on screen. We can't have this guy dying on screen. And I said, no. It's about the heroic sacrifice. It's about the grief of all the survivors when they come together for him afterwards. That's why we're having it in there. And she said, okay, and that took about 2 weeks of back and forth notes with her to say, okay, she said, fine, let the writer go with this and I'll see what it looks like. And then she saw it. She said, I trust what you've done. I'll see the storyboard to make sure that, the artists don't, that follow this so that they don't do something that I'm not comfortable with. And I'll be careful all the way through production on this one, but you've got your death, and that was a big deal. And again, every other censor we've ever worked with would have said no. That on other shows, and we just happened to have this understanding woman who liked and respected the books and said, "Okay, give it a shot."
Who understood what was trying to get done.
Yeah.
Okay, one more behind the scenes. Pull back the curtain here. So first season, we're all off doing other things. You're doing Exo Squad. You get a phone call saying, hey, we're going to do second season of X-Men. Yay. Okay, great. We'll pick up where we left off. Yay, we'll roll forward. And then Sydney Iwanter said to you, but Eric, about Morph. Okay, what about Morph?
Uh-oh.
Well, we had a focus group with a bunch of 7-year-olds, and we asked them who's their favorite character. And they all said, Morph! Because in the pilot, he's friends with everyone. He makes everyone laugh, and all the episodes hadn't aired yet. So, what?
They'd seen maybe 6 episodes, and he's in the first 2.
Yeah, and he's funny.
And so Sidney, he says, I know how hard you worked to be able to kill this character. I know how much it meant to you, and it was real. It was real. But is there any way you could find to bring him back? He died off screen, so maybe this could be like in a soap opera or in a comic book where they didn't really die. Okay. So we were heartbroken for about a day, and then we think, well, maybe we could do some cool stories with it.
And you did.
And it ended up.
Man, y'all made it into y'all made like a situation where y'all didn't want to do it to make it amazing, because when y'all brought back Morph as Broken Morph, and then it was like a whole different storyline about how Mr. Sinister messed with his mind and things like that. Yeah, like it was just like that was another aspect, like you were saying, consequences towards was showing high stake, how level of the high stakes that these X-Men were going through. Y'all definitely did it, and it made y'all, it made the show grow even more. And I was just like, I loved it.
That's nice.
It was just,
That's a nice way to put it. I appreciate hearing that, because it was those were a few dark moments where it's like, oh my God, it's going to be. But again, 30 years later, and
I loved, yeah. I mean, no, I loved like especially when y'all did like for instance, Days of Future Past, the first part that you wrote, like one of my favorite characters in the series was Bishop, and what I loved every time, even though it's not comic book, the same one-to-one. I mean, it's still, it's like comic book canon. Thank you. It's not like it was still strong enough to stand alone in its own kind of level, and the thing that reminded me of Bishop all the time was the harmonica play every time that he comes on screen. And I was like, and then with the giant, like, Jerry, mullet. Yeah.
Magnificent.
It's like a lion mane. I just loved it.
and I, having written that, I loved Wolverine, who is of a certain age at that point in the future when this is all happening, and just dismissively taking on Bishop and just calling him rookie, and Bishop being this whole grown-ass man who is not a rookie in any way, shape, or form, but to Wolverine, who's by then 200 years old, I guess he would have been. But so I very much enjoyed their interplay, and the fact that we've talked about this. If the internet existed then like it does now, I'm not sure how comfortable any of us would have been or able to do certain things.
To make big changes like that.
Because if fans had found out and gone online and said, "Where's Kitty Pryde? How dare you? What's going on?"
Well, to be fair, though, to play the devil's advocate in that, because I was thinking the same thing, though, too, because, I mean, there's certain things that comic books just cannot work on TV. And like with Kitty Pryde and that whole situation was weird. I mean, like, how would you be able to show that, especially to explain that to young kids the way that they're expecting? I mean, even in the movie didn't do that. They used Wolverine.
Yeah,
I mean,
in my mind, that's when I read Days of Future Past. That was the first note I gave Julia and Bob. The writer said, "Look,"
and Marty Eisenberg.
Say, guys, I know her spirit goes back in this, but I just don't think our audience that it's going to be hard to get across in a more real. TV's more realistic. You're right. There's something about comic books that you can go with stuff like that. I think it's going to be hard to get across. I think we need a real person going back. And since Kitty Pryde isn't in our group anyway, we're starting without her. I think we have a certain leeway as far as how this information gets back. And that's when we all sat down with Larry and we all decided on Bishop. And it worked out great. I mean, I think people really enjoy the show. And it was a great introduction to Bishop for us. And we ended up using him on 8 or 10 episodes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So it was just a win-win-win for us. But she's right. We felt confident making changes like that because we had everybody's support. But in 2023, it might have been more difficult. It might have been
a lot more red tape. A lot more. And was there a story that you wanted to tell that you either was denied or just could not get the opportunity to tell it?
Not much.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but the team of X-Men was already, you got 8 players plus Charles Xavier. Just servicing each of them anyway was a challenge. Yeah. So making sure everyone got the story time they deserved.
There were writers that loved certain issues of the book that wanted to try to get them in, and we'd take pitches on the premises, and sometimes it would work out, or we'd use part of it, and sometimes we wouldn't. So there were individual writers that had stuff that they really wanted to do. There was one episode, if you have a bigger budget and a bigger staff, people are used to cranking out scripts and getting to a point and throwing out 3 or 4 that they just finally decide, well, it was close, but it didn't quite work. We had one of those, and it was an Omega Red episode that I believed in, but to everybody else's credit, from the beginning, they were giving me warning signs saying, Eric, this doesn't look good. This doesn't look good. And finally, but I pushed it through, and the writer and I, hand in the script, and everybody says, no, done. So you got to throw this one out. And so what, our low budget world, what that meant was my boss, Sydney, saying, okay, Eric, you blew this one. It's Friday. We need a fresh script by Monday. You're going to come up with a whole new Omega Red story over the weekend, and you're going to write 40 pages, and it's going to have to be good, because we don't have the money to pay a writer to come in and spend 3 weeks redoing this, and we need so that I nailed myself by hanging out to a story that I thought was good and the writer thought was good. And in retrospect, I've read it recently. It wasn't very good. we all have our down days, and everybody else was right this time, and it just cost me a lost weekend.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and also there's something that also y'all could probably tell me, can confirm, because I was like, wow, really, this is interesting. I heard this from somewhere, and I want, is it true that one of the story arcs inspired comic writer Bob Harris, who did Age of Apocalypse, while absolutely, and it was possibly my favorite episode, and certainly the one I thought was the most inspired one to come up with, called One Man's Worth.
2-parter.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And the whole point of it was, it's a time travel show. What would happen if somebody went back in time and killed Xavier when he was in college, and there would be no X-Men? And what that does is it makes the audience think, this is the X-Men's impact on the world. And I'm showing you a future world where someone's gone back and made them never happen. And how bad would that be for the world? And so, of course, I'm stealing from 2 of my favorite stories. One of them is
One Man. It's a Wonderful Life.
One of them is It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. And the angel shows him what the world would have been like if he'd never lived.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was City on the Edge of Forever, which is a Star Trek episode from the end of the first season.
Yeah.
Where this time travel portal shows Kirk what would happen if he saves the life of a woman he's fallen in love with. If he saves her life, she's a pacifist. U.S. doesn't go into World War II. Hitler takes over the planet. Everything goes all to hell. It was a very cool idea. Harlan Ellison, of course. Brilliant idea. So that one, to me, was, I thought it was a wonderful idea. For some reason, it took us forever. Time travel stories are hard. The logic gets twisted, and people have different ideas about it. So we pitched that story, and we sent it to Bob, like we sent all of them.
Right.
So he had it, and we were developing it, and we had, I'd say, the first 2 outlines, maybe even the first 2 scripts, first drafts of the script set. And he was out visiting, evidently. I didn't know the timeline on this, but it's in one of the Apocalypse comic books,
right,
where they mentioned this, where he came out and spent a few days with us and looked over all the stuff we were doing. And he said, that would be cool for something in the books. And so he took that back to New York with him. And while we were polishing up the script, and while we were storyboarding and animating and getting it all done, he got a bunch of people together, said, we're going to do
this. Is so some of the work that they started doing for the Age of Apocalypse series of books, because the script writing took so long, Larry Houston was able to utilize some of that art into the script.
So since it took us
So
it took us 6 months to get to the storyboard and design part on that. within that 6 months, they'd committed over at Marvel to try to make this. They didn't know what to call it, I guess, at the time, but Age of Apocalypse series of books. And so they started drawing stuff. And so Larry called them and said, well, what are you drawing? And so he said, well, wouldn't it be cool if I used a few of those, in the actual design for the show that you're basing it on? Very cool. So back and forth. So the show, the
One Man's Worth
comes out, and around the same time, maybe a month later or so, the first issue of Age of Apocalypse comes out. And so it didn't occur to people that usually we take from the books. It didn't occur to the people at the time that they saw our story and they ran with it. And that which made us feel great because we'd taken so much from them, like from Chris Claremont's stories and other things, taken so much to make our show. The fact that they found something special that you'd originated. And wake up, like going to bed one night, say, One Man's Worth, I know what we need to do. So that come out of my head, and now was the basis for something that they did so spectacularly. I mean, obviously, that was like 3 years work of 100 talented people, and they did this spark of an idea, which I stole from somebody else already.
Homage, honey. It's an homage.
It's an homage. And they made it something new and special. So that was, I felt gratitude to that. There, as the fans were a little confused for a while, which one came first.
Right.
But we can tell you it was One Man's Worth. And boy, what a great thing to be part of, because I think that's the best thing that the X-Men have done since our show. Since the mid 90s now to the mid 20s, in the last 30 years, I think Age of Apocalypse is probably the best thing that they've done.
I mean, for an off series like that, yeah, most definitely, I would definitely agree, because it's just because when y'all got me into liking the X-Men, to be honest with you, from when I was growing up, and then when they were saying, oh, this is like Wolverine with one arm and Cyclops with one eye and stuff like that, I was like, oh, this is going to be a cool experience and stuff. And then later on, when I was told, oh yeah, they got that from the animated series, I'm like, no, they didn't. There's no way. But now since I heard it directly, that makes sense. That's so awesome. And my final question is that one could argue that X-Men animated series was the beginning of Marvel getting more serious in animation in the 90s. Soon after, there were shows like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Silver Surfer, and more. Looking back at it and its amazing 5-year run, how much of a special place does X-Men the animated series hold for you two?
Well, I'll tell you this, and we are so thrilled, but we're thrilled at 30 years later. We weren't real sure. We knew the show was a big hit when it came out, and it afforded us multiple employment opportunities over the years. But and when the movies came out, it's like, oh, they used our team. Those were our babies that they put up there. But we had not been attending cons or fests, and the internet was not what it was until a few years ago in terms of fans reaching out. We did not know.
How many hundreds of millions of people watched the show. And we started going to cons 6 years ago when we wrote our first book on the series called Previously on X-Men,
an oral history of the making of the show.
And we went online and started talking to people and realized that X-Men had shown everywhere. There were not just Americans and Canadians that grew up being a favorite show of theirs, but just Latin America, Arab countries, all of Europe, all of Asia.
We didn't know.
We bump into people. We bump into people in Singapore.
We're in Singapore, and I'm wearing this jacket.
And
I love that.
The Malaysian TSA workers run up to us and say, X-Men was my favorite. I'm growing up.
They don't know who we are. They just thought this is, oh my God, I loved X-Men. I said, you watched X-Men?
Yeah. And we've gotten the impression from people all over that it just, everybody has a favorite song. Everybody has a favorite TV show that just struck them right.
It's an iconic theme song. I mean, at this point, it's a very iconic theme song. So
Wasserman. Yeah.
And we have those things as fans. I mean, we had those moments as fans where something's just stayed with us our whole life. and just grabbed this and forever and will always be a favorite. The fact that we were able to be part of something that did that for hundreds of millions of people is just it's crazy. It's crazy. It blows your mind.
It does. We couldn't be more grateful.
But when I mean, like nowadays, if someone says like, "Oh, X-Men," and then like, I mean, y'all have a genre, and then y'all self, I mean, like with it itself, I mean, they always call it 92 X-Men. I mean, everything that goes back into like, I mean, the X-Men of the now can be traced back to your series. I mean, essentially, like you're essentially the grandfather of all of this that's happening. That's currently happening. So I mean that's unbelievable. I'd have to say it. I mean,
it is. Thank you for that. It is though. It's unbelievable to us. It's still unbelievable to us, you know.
And we just got the most wonderful thing. The new show coming out, XMEN 97, which come out this fall on Disney Plus. The fact that it's a bunch of fans of our show that have put this together, and they are making it a continuation of our show, not some new spin-off or not different characters or not a different world. It is as if it starts back up a few weeks after ours ended.
Wow.
So if you want to get ready for X-Men 97, go back and do a rewatch of X-Men the Animated Series, and you'll be ready.
Obviously, these people all have, they have the perspective of people 30, a generation and a half younger. They've been through different things. They'll have their own take on some of the stories, but they all came to this out of a love for what our show was.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that's just
huge.
It's so we're really looking forward to it coming out. We have they have us on as consultants.
They invited us back as consulting producers for the show with Larry Houston, which they never do that in Hollywood.
Yeah. And Larry Houston too. So he was in charge of the art and everything. Oh man.
In fact, they announced last at
San Diego
that they've hired Larry to design their opening credits.
Are you serious? Oh wow, that's crazy. That is so awesome. Such a great honor to do. All I pray on is I just hope the continuity holds to kind of like how the original one was, because like, I mean, it's Disney, so I'm kind of wondering if it's going to be watered down comparatively to how it's going to be. But I am looking forward to seeing the X-Men 97.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. As are we.
I mean, that's my own personal take, but there we go. But Eric, Julia, I could talk X-Men all day with you. But I gotta hold self-control with this. But this is the part, like, if any folks or fans of the series are able to reach out, what is the best place that they could find out and support y'all?
I'm on Twitter way too often, and we have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page. I am on Twitter, and we are always at XMEN TAS, which is for X-Men the Animated Series, but XMEN TAS. And we have a website. We need to get that updated. So please reach out to us, follow us, find us, and we are hoping, with COVID kind of behind us, we are excited to get out there and start going to more cons. So if you have cons in your neighborhood, let them know if you'd like to see us. We'd love to come talk.
Yeah, we'll do. Well, thank you, Eric, Julia, for your time, and I hope everything. Thank you so much for making a terrific show. So I just want to say that up front.
All right.
Thank you
so much.
And guys, thank you once again. If you definitely love interviews like this, speaking to some awesome people, definitely go check us out on our website, confreaksandgeeks.com, or go to our any podcast services out there on Pop Culture Gems. So once again, this is Davis signing out. Y'all, take it easy.